we're going to look at David and Goliath. So we're talking about faith, and a couple of weeks ago we had the VBS, and we had on Thursday afternoon we had a youth retreat. And you know, VBS was all about trust God. And so when I got to the youth retreat, I read the story of David and Goliath, and my question to the youth was, do you trust God? You're telling all of these kids that that's what you're supposed to do, but do you actually trust God? And so we did a study of David versus Goliath. And so where I'm going to start, let me just kind of give you a setup. One thing that we often miss about David and Goliath is that I think it's kind of cool how the Bible will sometimes show you a story that is totally contradictory to a story that you're about to read. So in this case, one story that we often forget is that Saul, right before the David versus Goliath thing, Saul is told to go into a city and completely destroy everything. Everything. And he lets the king live. And so God is angry with him. And so that takes us over to David, because God, at this point, he's like, pretty much, Saul, I'm done with you. There's going to be a new king. And so Samuel goes out and he finds David, and then David becomes a part of Saul's court. He actually ends up playing the lute for him and stuff like that, and the lyre. But at this point, David is coming into the camp, and the Philistines are on one side, Israel's on the other side, and Goliath steps out front and says, if anyone can beat me, then we'll surrender, right? And so they've all been shaking in their boots, all right? And then David comes in, and remember, David is not a soldier. David is a servant at this point. He's not a king. I mean, he has an idea that he knows he's going to be king because Samuel has already anointed him. But he's still pretty low on the totem pole. And he comes in, and we're going to start out with David and his conversation with his brothers and some men around him. Then David spoke to the men who were standing by him, saying, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach of Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the armies of the living God? Whoa. You know, he goes and guns blazing. He's ready to go. You know, all of these guys are shaking. And he comes in, who is this guy? I don't care if he's 10 feet or not. Who cares? And so the people answered him in accord with his words, saying, thus it will be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, I don't know if I'm saying that right, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger burned against David, and he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few little sheep in the wilderness? I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, and you have come down here in order to see the battle. So his brothers are saying, I know who you are. Why don't you go back to those little sheep? You know? Like, just get out of here. Go away. You know? So David's first test actually is not against Goliath. It's against his brother. His brother comes in and says, you sheep herder, just go back. You're just coming here to watch us fight the Philistines. You're just coming here as a spectator. What do you know about war? Go home. But David said, what have I done now? Was it not just a question? Then he turned away from him to another and said the same thing, and the people answered the same way as before. When the words which David spoke were heard, they told them to Saul, and he sent for him. So you hear David say something to one thing and his brother's reaction. Then he says it to someone else, and Saul's like, I got to get a load of what this guy has to say. David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail on account of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Then Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, while he has been a warrior from his youth. So we had his brother condemning him. Now we've got Saul saying you can't do it. We have two people already. But David said to Saul, your servant has been tending his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went out after him and attacked him and rescued it from his mouth. And then he rose up against me, and I seized him by the beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living God. All right, so my question to you, we're talking about faith here. So, had David tested his faith? What is he saying right there? He's saying, I know that I can kill this Philistine not only because God is with me, but I've killed a lion and a bear. And you know, often when I was growing up, I didn't pay attention to that part of the story. But that's pretty bad. I mean, think about what David has had before, like just protecting those sheep. He wouldn't kill a lion and a bear. I mean, seriously, I wouldn't be scared of a Philistine either, because lions and bears are pretty scary. So you have two different ideas here. You've got David's faith, because he's tested it. He knows what God can do. He's seen God protect him from the lions and the bears. So we're just going to go a little bit further in the story. This go and may the Lord be with you is what Saul says to him after then. Then Saul clothed David with garments and put a bronze helmet on his head, and he clothed him with armor. David girded his sword over his armor and tried to walk. And I'm kind of picture this. You got David, who's still very small at this point, and he's got this big heavy suit of armor on. He's trying to walk around with a big old sword, a big heavy suit of armor. And so David tries to walk, and he says, I can't go with these, for I have not tested them. And then we know the rest of the story, pretty much. David takes the armor off, goes out. He actually threatens the Philistine again before he kills him. He says, I am going to chop off your head, and by the end of the day, the birds are going to be flying around you. And so, in this, we see a very good testament of a couple of things of faith. First, David's faith was tested. He tested it. He knew that before he went out to this Philistine that God was with him, because God had been with him with the bears and with the lions. And he wasn't going to let anyone deter him, because he knew his place with God. And his place with God was not a servant. His place with God was to be a king. He understood his identity in that. Then the next part that we'll skip over if we're not careful is that he says, after he's given the armor and everything, he says, I cannot go with these, I have not tested them. So a lot of things that we want to do, we'll have these great ideas, and we want to go out and do them. And then we get with other people and they say, yeah, that's a great idea, but you need to do this way and this way and this way and this way and this way. Just like the armor. Saul said, okay, you can go out there and fight that Philistine, but you need this and this and this and this and this. And David said, he basically said, no, I need what God gave me. And so, a lot of the times, our faith is crushed by things that people say, all right, well, you can't do this. Of course you can't do that. Or, if you're going to do that, then maybe you should do this, and this, and then you're way down. All right. So, this is going to kind of be a survey of faith, in a way. So we've looked at David. We've learned from David that his faith was he tested his faith, and that when he was condemned, he got his identity from God. And we also learned that he went in with the tools that God gave him, not with the tools that everyone else tried to give him. All right, let's take a look at Peter was called. And this is where I'm going to try to fit in a little bit of my story too for people that don't know my story. And by the way, I'm trying to do this in Pages, and we had a Pages keyboard issue, so I might run into a word somewhere along here that I can't read because we added some letters to it or something like that. So anyway, Luke 5:2. And he saw two boats lying on the edge, this is Jesus, but the fishermen had gotten out of them and were washing their nets, and he got into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put out a little way from the land. All right, so let's start there. He got into the boat, and he asked him to push away from the land. All right, so the first step of Simon's faith was what? You can answer out loud if you want. First test of Simon's faith was what? To see if he could let Jesus into the boat, right? So he could have said, when Jesus stepped into that boat, he could have said, "Get out of my boat. It's my boat. What are you doing in my boat?" Right? So he lets Jesus in his boat. And a lot of the times, if we become a believer, we let Jesus into our boat. All right, so Jesus is in our boat now, and we're good. We're going to heaven, you know. Jesus is in our boat. We're going to heaven. Then Jesus says to Simon, he says, "Push your boat out." All right? So, first of all, letting him in the boat. Second of all, let's push it out. All right? So Simon at that point could have said, "You're crazy. It's my boat. Did you buy this boat? I don't see your name on this boat." You know? But Simon said, "All right. I'll push out." So, and he sat down and began teaching the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, another command, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets." Now this time, Simon, the first two times it doesn't say that Simon said anything. I would have to think that somewhere in this there was probably a little dialogue, because someone doesn't just step in your boat and without saying anything. But this is the first time that they actually quote Simon as saying something. So he says, "Master, we worked hard all night and caught nothing, but I will do as you say and let down the nets." All right, so a command, and Simon says, "Wait a second. We've been working all day long, and you want us to go back out and put down our nets again? All right." When they had done this, they enclosed a great quantity of fish. Their nets began to break. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat for them to come and help them. And they came and filled both of the boats, so that they began to sink. But then Simon Peter saw that when Simon Peter saw that, he fell down at Jesus' feet, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." For amazement has seized him and all of his companions because of the catch of the fish which they had taken. All right, so a lot of times in our lives, we'll get in the boat. We'll let Jesus in the boat. We'll say, "Jesus, all right, I understand that you want me to do this." We have an option of saying, "Okay, I'll push away from the shore." You know, for me, I think I let Jesus in the boat around high school. I became a believer around high school. Then I started teaching out of college. And then I got burned out on it. I didn't want to teach anymore. And around the time I was tired of teaching, I got a call from a guy that lived in Jordan. And he said, "Hey, why don't you come over and teach a couple of classes?" And, you know, that was the first time after college that I felt God saying, "Push the boat out." And I could have said, "Get out of my boat." And instead I said, "All right, I don't know why I'm going to Jordan, It's not a big deal. I was there for 2 months. And the thing